How did an obscure railway built to haul potatoes inspire a famous children's story? A strange, square steam engine chugging through the English countryside was originally just a clever bureaucratic workaround. Writing on 8 June 2026, Atlas Obscura revives a forgotten transit experiment from the Cambridgeshire fens. To bypass the slow legal process of building a traditional railway, 19th-century engineers built a hybrid street tram to haul fruit and coal. The history of the line poses a charming question about infrastructure. How does a cheap fix for moving potatoes end up shaping both modern light rail and beloved children's literature? Written in Atlas Obscura, narrated for Arwa. About the Wisbech and Upwell Tramway was essentially a light railway operating from the attractive Georgian town of Wisbech, England, into the fens of Cambridgeshire, terminating at the village of Upwell in an important agricultural area about 6 miles away. When railways first started to be installed in the UK in the 19th century, a significant part of the cost was legal expenses associated with the need to have an Act of Parliament to authorize each individual line, a very slow process. This experimental system, however, operated like a cross between a street tramway and a railway. It was built under the Tramways Act 1870 and operated in much the same way as lines were operated under the subsequent Light Railway Act 1896. This legislation owed its origins, in part, to the initial success of this experiment. This resulted in the UK building many rural railways, such as the Lead Hills and Wanlock Head Light Railway, the highest adhesion railway in the country. The tramway might be seen as the forerunner of the many light rail systems operating in the world on a combination of dedicated and road-sharing tracks, although the importance of freight to this line seems unique in the UK, but not unknown in the rest of the world. The tramway was instigated in 1883 by the Great Eastern Railway. It was intended to increase both passenger and freight traffic on their main line, and at its peak, operated 6 return passenger services per day, often including a freight element in the train. Alongside this were numerous dedicated freight services. The outgoing freight was both fruit and potatoes, the main agricultural products in the area, and the majority of incoming freight was coal, much of it destined for the many steam-powered pumping engines being used at the time to enable the drainage of the East Anglian fens. The line had a coal depot next to the Wisbech Canal at Outwell Basin for on-shipment by barge of coal into the more isolated interior of the fens. During the fruit-picking season, traffic was intense, with hundreds of fruit wagons being stored in sidings and necessitating a need for a mobile fruit transport office in the form of a modified box van. Initially, passengers could be picked up or dropped off at any point along the line by waving to the driver or asking the guard, as well as the several formal stations between Wisbech East and Upwell, but following accidents, this was later restricted to a number of request stops. In 1966, the Wisbech Canal was filled in, having been officially closed in 1922. Well Creek, which the canal connected with, however, remained open and offered a route from the rail system into the Fens waterway network until the line was closed. Because the line was officially a street tramway, the Board of Trade required locomotives to be provided with cowcatchers and side skirts. This resulted in the construction of several double-cabbed, four-wheeled steam locomotives of a particular design called a tram engine. The tram engines were rectangular and had the appearance of a brake guards van, or some would say a wooden shed on wheels.
Fans of the books or TV shows starring Thomas the Tank Engine will remember one of the later and best-loved characters was Toby, the tram engine, who was nearly always accompanied by Henrietta, a four-wheeled passenger car. The initial passenger rolling stock on the tramway were 2 4-wheeled and 2 8-wheeled bogie carriages. A later character was Mavis, a 040 diesel shunter, also based on the tramway stock. The author of the railway stories, the Reverend Wald Awdry, lived close to the tramway at the time, 1953 to 1965, and both Toby and Mavis will have been familiar sights. In 1952, the steam engines, now in their second generation, with the initial 4-wheeled engines being replaced by superficially similar 6-wheeled engines with improved boilers between 1903 and 1921, were initially supplemented, then replaced by 040 Class 04 diesel mechanical locomotives made by Drury.
4 of the steam-powered tram engines, kept supposedly for emergencies, but there are lots of old photos showing both the diesel shunters and the tram engines being used concurrently in the late 1950s. The diesel locomotives also had to have cow catchers and side skirts to meet Board of Trade requirements. When Audrey later introduced the character Mavis, it was illustrated with cow catcher and side skirts, almost unknown for British diesels of the time, a characteristic maintained for the animated TV series. The local claim that this line was the first entirely diesel-powered railway in the UK seems rather tenuous. The traffic on the line was initially limited to a speed of 8 miles per hour, and after 1904 to 12.5 miles per hour. And with the introduction of motor buses after World War I, it could not compete in terms of speed for passengers.
The line was closed to passenger traffic in 1927, but kept going for freight services until 1966. The last scheduled train on the line ran on 20th May 1966, some 3 days before its official closure, with occasional heritage specials running until the tracks were removed. Whilst a few of the railway's buildings were put into reuse, the extensive sidings, etc., were built over, with little clue of the past beyond occasional street names, such as the Tramway in Outwell, Railway Road in Wisbech, and Tram Station Lane in Emneth, plus remains of trackbed and occasionally reused buildings and bridges converted for road use. From the 1980s onwards, locals started a campaign to commemorate and provide information about the tramway. Amazingly, for various local political reasons, this series of mementos, including a sculptured signpost and 5 comprehensive information boards at strategic points, was not completed until 2024. For rail enthusiasts and those who are fans of the Rev Audrey's railway stories, what is left of the line has become something of a pilgrimage. Related tags: know before you go. The various info boards are not easy to find from the description given on official webpage unless you have local knowledge. If using a sat-nav, try the following addresses. Nearest to Wisbech Terminus, 90 Elm Road, Wisbech. Elm Road Crossing Site, Wisbech B&Q Store Parking Lot. Bose's Bridge Depot, probably nearer to the Elm Bridge Depot site. Junction of Church Lane and Outwell Road. Nearest to Outwell Basin Depot, 1 Rob's Chase, Outwell. Original sculptural signpost, the Tramway, Tupewell. Upwell Terminus, 25 Townley Close, Upwell. If you are planning to try to see as much of the remains of the line as possible, it is viable to do it on a bike, but you need to allow lots of time. A visit to the tramway display at the Wisbech and Fenland Museum before you start is a good idea. Fans of classic British comedy movies also visit. The coach used as the buffet car in the Titfield Thunderbolt originated here, and the museum has a fine, scratch-built model. Whilst one of the diesel-powered locos survives, and the same museum, Mangap's Museum Essex, has dressed up another Class 04 shunter with cowcatcher and side skirts as a replica, none of the tram engines were taken into preservation. At least 2 heritage railways have, or are working on, working replica tram engines, powered by diesel, which they use as Toby characters on their lucrative Thomas the Tank Engine open days. Community contributors. Added by. Published June 8, 2026. Sources: www.lner.info/co/ger/Wisbech/Wisbech, www.archive.org/hhp/media/archive.org/hhp/media/friends-the-tank-and-the-complete-series-1-1984/22-Thomas-in-trouble, www.archive.org/hp/media/archive.org/thomas-the-tank-h-and-friends-series-1-1984/22-Thomas-in-trouble.